Just in, a private demand made by Donald Trump for critical heavy machinery has triggered an unexpected political and economic standoff, and the fallout is spreading fast. According to multiple reports, Trump's request wasn't met with negotiation, delay, or compromise. It was met with a single word, and that one-word reply may now be setting off a cascading crisis across trade, manufacturing, and diplomatic channels. So how did a demand for industrial equipment turn into a pressure point with global consequences? Who said no? And why did that refusal matter so much? And what does this reveal about leverage, power, and the fragile state of economic diplomacy right now? Tonight, we're breaking it all down. We'll explain what Trump demanded, why the answer shocked analysts, and how this could hit American workers, markets, and international relationships far sooner than most people expect. Because once you understand what's really happening here, it becomes clear this was never just about machinery. Here's what happened. In late negotiations tied to infrastructure, trade logistics, and industrial supply chains, Donald Trump reportedly pushed for accelerated access to heavy machinery assets, equipment critical to large-scale construction, extraction, and transport projects. We're talking about machinery valued in the tens of billions of dollars, produced primarily in Canada, Germany, and East Asia, and already locked into long-term supply contracts. According to documents cited by Reuters, Bloomberg, and the Financial Times, the request centered on fast-tracking delivery schedules and overriding existing export priorities. The timeline? Months, not years. But on the other end of that demand sat policymakers who saw serious red flags. The response wasn't a memo. It wasn't a counteroffer. It wasn't a diplomatic statement. It was one word: no. And it gets worse. That refusal reportedly came from a key international partner whose manufacturing sector supplies nearly 22% of U.S. heavy industrial imports, according to 2024 trade data. Analysts immediately flagged the moment as a potential inflection point. Why? Because this wasn't just about equipment. It was about control of supply chains, political leverage, and who bends first under pressure. The context matters deeply here. This comes as U.S. aluminum prices have surged 40% since June 2026, hitting record highs above $5,200 per metric ton. American aluminum inventories have collapsed from 750,000 tons at the start of 2025 to below 300,000 tons today, a devastating 60% drop in just 12 months. Construction firms nationwide are reporting project delays and cost overruns. The Midwest aluminum premium reached a record 96 cents per pound, up 65% since June. Canadian suppliers, who provide 70% of nearly 4 million tons of U.S. aluminum imports, have stopped discretionary shipments because they're losing money under Trump's 50% tariff structure. To humanize this, consider a construction foreman in Ohio relying on delayed machinery deliveries for a federally funded project. Every month of delay risks layoffs, penalties, and lost contracts. Multiply that by thousands of projects nationwide. This single-word answer now threatens to ripple outward, from factory floors to boardrooms to diplomatic back channels. So what exactly triggered such a hard stop? To understand why this escalated so quickly, you have to understand how heavy machinery supply chains actually work. And more importantly, why Trump found himself in a position to make this demand in the first place. These machines aren't interchangeable widgets. A single high-capacity excavator or turbine transporter can cost $15 million, require 12 to 24 months of lead time, and depend on hundreds of upstream components. According to OECD data, over 68% of specialized industrial machinery used in U.S. megaprojects is imported. That dependency creates vulnerability. Trump's demand reportedly sought to reprioritize U.S. access, effectively leapfrogging other buyers. Analysts describe it as a test of economic leverage, seeing whether political pressure could override contractual norms. But here's the kicker. The supplier country, specifically Canada under Prime Minister Mark Carney, had its own constraints. labor shortages, energy costs up 31% since 2022, and existing commitments tied to climate transition infrastructure. More critically, Carney recognized that Canada held unprecedented leverage at precisely this moment. Let's walk through the mechanism that created this crisis. When President Trump doubled aluminum tariffs to 50% in June 2025, the stated goal was encouraging investment in local U.S. production and reducing import dependence. But tariffs don't work instantaneously. You can't simply flip a switch and build new aluminum smelters overnight. These facilities require years of planning, billions in investment, and complex supply chains. Meanwhile, American industries still need aluminum today, right now, for cars, planes, buildings, and thousands of other products. Here's what happened instead. Canadian exporters looked at the math and realized they couldn't profitably ship aluminum to the United States under the new tariff structure. The premium Americans were paying didn't fully cover the 50% duty. So Canadian producers did what any rational business would do. They redirected shipments to Europe and other markets where they could actually make money. This left U.S. inventories in free fall. Gregory Whitbecker, president at Whitsend Commodity Advisors, explained it clearly. Canadian suppliers stopped discretionary shipments to the U.S. because they were losing money, which led to a drop in U.S. inventories. Jorge Vasquez, managing director at Harbor Aluminum, noted that the current Midwest premium of 96 cents per pound is way higher than costs justify, estimating it should be around 86 cents. The market is pricing in both physical shortages and expectations that prices will climb even higher. History matters here. In 1973, during the oil embargo, the U.S. learned how quickly supply leverage can shift power. More recently, during the 2021 semiconductor shortage, automakers lost over $210 billion globally due to supply disruptions. This situation follows the same logic. Think of it like an airport runway. You can demand priority landing, but if the runway is full, someone else has to crash or divert. The refusal wasn't personal, it was structural, but it was also strategic. Mark Carney, the former Bank of Canada governor and Bank of England governor who became prime minister with one overriding mandate, calculated something crucial. Canada's leverage is at its peak right now, precisely because American industries are suffering under Trump's own policies. The aluminum shortage, the construction delays, the manufacturing cost pressures, these are self-inflicted wounds. And Carney understood that saying yes to Trump's urgent demands would be giving away Canada's strongest negotiating position for free right before the critical USMCA review scheduled for July 2026. Think about it from a game theory perspective. If Canada immediately supplies the resources Trump needs, it relieves the pressure on American industries, which removes Trump's incentive to negotiate seriously on broader trade issues. But if Canada holds firm, the pain intensifies for U.S. manufacturers, construction firms, and ultimately American consumers who will pay higher prices. That pain creates political pressure on Trump to reach an actual deal, not just demand concessions. And once that no landed, markets reacted. Shares of several U.S. infrastructure firms dipped 3 to 5% within days. Logistics insurers adjusted risk premiums. Trade analysts started modeling retaliation scenarios. The construction sector is getting hammered. We're talking about an industry that depends on steady, predictable supplies of aluminum, steel, and heavy machinery. But tariff tensions have created exactly the opposite: chaos, unpredictability, and skyrocketing costs. One analysis from the Association of Equipment Dealers warned about the impact on the Canadian economy of tariffing heavy equipment, parts, and related supplies, noting that uncertainty has become the business model for 2026. Experts warn this moment exposes a deeper issue. Political demands can't manufacture capacity that doesn't exist. And when leaders push anyway, the system pushes back. So who feels this first? Let's walk through the categories because the impacts are widespread and devastating. In Michigan and Pennsylvania, Machinery-dependent manufacturing plants face scheduling uncertainty. One delayed shipment can idle 300, 500 workers temporarily. For families already dealing with inflation, even short disruptions matter. In Texas, energy infrastructure projects risk cost overruns. Contractors warn delays could add 8–12% to total project costs. Construction projects across the United States are facing delays and cost overruns directly tied to aluminum shortages and equipment access issues. When a commercial building project in Ohio needs aluminum framing and the price has jumped 40% in 6 months, that cost doesn't disappear. It gets passed to developers who pass it to tenants who pass it to consumers. Workers on those projects face uncertainty about job continuity. Families planning home renovations are seeing quotes skyrocket because contractors can't secure materials at predictable prices. The automotive industry is particularly vulnerable. Aluminum is critical for modern vehicle manufacturing, especially as companies transition to electric vehicles that require lightweight materials for battery efficiency. Ford, General Motors, and other manufacturers that depend on steady aluminum supplies are now dealing with record-high costs that squeeze already thin profit margins. This could mean higher vehicle prices for American consumers, production slowdowns, or even plant closures if the shortage intensifies. Consider a mid-sized construction firm in Arizona with a fixed-price contract. Without machinery on time, penalties pile up. Margins vanish. Owners face layoffs or bankruptcy, not because of demand, but because of access. Small businesses in the construction sector are getting crushed. Unlike massive corporations, small contractors can't absorb sudden 40% increases in material costs. They operate on tight margins, fixed bids, and limited access to capital. When a small roofing company in Texas locked in a contract price 6 months ago and now faces aluminum costs that have exploded, that company either loses money on the job or risks breach of contract. Some will go bankrupt. We're talking about real businesses employing real people facing existential threats. Major firms have already disclosed supply risk exposure in SEC filings. Analysts note capital expenditure plans may be revised downward if uncertainty persists. Caterpillar, a major heavy equipment manufacturer, saw stock fluctuations tied to tariff impacts. The aerospace sector, which requires specialized aluminum alloys, is reporting supply chain disruptions. Even the packaging industry, think beverage cans, food containers, faces higher costs that ultimately translate to higher prices at grocery stores. Alcoa, one of America's largest aluminum producers, has benefited from higher prices, but can't rapidly expand production to meet demand. European trade officials have emphasized contract integrity. Asian suppliers are watching closely, wary of precedent-setting political interference. Canada's pivot toward China is accelerating. Prime Minister Carney visited Beijing on January 12, 2026, seeking to smooth over past tensions and expand trade relationships as America becomes what he called no longer a reliable partner. This represents a fundamental geopolitical shift. For decades, Canada's economy has been tightly integrated with the United States. Now, Canadian leaders are actively pursuing alternatives. The European Union is observing this crisis as a warning. If Trump's tariff strategy can backfire this spectacularly with America's closest ally and largest trading partner, what does that mean for transatlantic trade relations? Mexico, the third partner in USMCA, is also recalculating its position, recognizing that Canada's hard line might create space for better Mexican negotiating leverage. Experts from the Brookings Institution warn that politicizing industrial supply chains accelerates fragmentation, making everything more expensive. And the ripple effects, transportation, energy, housing, and even defense readiness, all triggered by a single refusal. One senior trade analyst told Bloomberg, "This wasn't a negotiation failure, it was a reality check." Another economist warned that short-term escalation could harden positions across future talks. The expert community is divided, but increasingly alarmed. Jorge Vasquez from Harbor Aluminum stated bluntly, "The premium is way higher than costs justify." He's warning that current prices reflect not just supply-demand fundamentals, but market psychology, fear of even worse shortages ahead. Gregory Whitbecker added, "I have doubts as to how far the premium can continue to rise," suggesting we might be approaching a breaking point where prices become so extreme that demand destruction kicks in, meaning projects simply get canceled. From a legal and economic standpoint, this situation creates unprecedented complications. The USMCA agreement includes dispute resolution mechanisms, but those processes take months or years. Meanwhile, businesses need aluminum today. Some legal experts suggest Trump could invoke national security provisions to compel Canadian cooperation, but that would likely trigger immediate retaliation and could collapse the entire trade framework. Legally, overriding contracts risks arbitration. Politically, it raises questions about credibility. Economically, it reinforces a shift away from centralized dependence. Political reactions are intensifying. Within the Republican Party, there's growing tension between Trump's populist tariff approach and traditional pro-business conservatives who are hearing from corporate constituents about real pain. Democrats are seizing on the crisis as evidence of failed economic policy, with several prominent senators calling for hearings on the aluminum shortage and its impacts on American competitiveness. Canadian political reactions matter too. Carney's approval ratings have actually risen following his firm stance. Canadians across the political spectrum are tired of what they perceive as bullying from Washington. Even conservatives who typically favor closer U.S. ties are supporting Carney's position, recognizing that Canada needs to defend its interests. This domestic political support gives Carney more room to maintain his hard line. Looking at short-term consequences, the next 30 to 90 days are critical. Watch for delayed project announcements, revised budgets, and intensified back-channel talks. Construction projects scheduled to break ground this spring could face delays or cancellations. Manufacturing plants might reduce shifts or temporarily close lines that depend on aluminum inputs. The aerospace sector could see delivery delays on commercial aircraft. Consumer prices for aluminum-intensive products, from cars to canned beverages, will likely continue rising. One senior trade analyst told Bloomberg, "This wasn't a negotiation failure, it was a reality check." Over the next 6 to 12 months, the bigger risk is structural. Partners diversify away, reducing U.S. leverage long term. If this standoff continues through the July USMCA review, we could see a complete breakdown of trade negotiations. Trump might threaten withdrawal from USMCA entirely, throwing North American trade into chaos. Alternatively, mounting pressure from American industries could force Trump to back down, accept less favorable terms, and remove or reduce the tariffs that created this mess. This isn't collapse, but it is constraint, and constraint reshapes power. Let's recap. A demand for heavy machinery exposed fragile supply chains built on decades of integration now crumbling under tariff pressure. A one-word refusal triggered economic and political ripples that are already hitting American workers, construction firms, and manufacturing plants. And the fallout now threatens not just immediate projects, but the entire framework of North American trade diplomacy heading into the critical USMCA review. The takeaway is simple. Power doesn't come from demands. It comes from leverage you can actually enforce. Trump's tariffs were supposed to create American leverage. Instead, they created desperate dependence. And when Carney recognized that vulnerability, he called the bluff with one word that may reshape continental economics for years. So here's the question. Was this refusal a warning shot or the start of a deeper realignment? If you want to stay informed on stories the mainstream media won't fully cover, make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell icon, because in today's economy, the quietest word can cause the loudest shockwaves. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.